All right, I've never self-hosted an app before, never done anything with a VPS. So when I saw this OpenShip announcement that got 2.5 million views, this OpenShip is an application platform for deploying and scaling applications on your own infrastructure. I thought, let me give this a try. And I went ahead and got it running, deployed Open SaaS, a clean version of Open SaaS, which is a free open source SaaS boilerplate template starter with 15,000 stars on GitHub. It's really great. You should check it out. And I got it running here on OpenSaaS.self.host, which is my domain for my VPS. And yeah, I'm just going to run through what I did to get it working, what I liked, what I didn't like, what I ran into, the problems I ran into, and so forth. So let's just start with getting a server on Hetzner. This was my first kind of bummer moment because everyone talks about how you've got a VPS for $5 a month. Well, there's not many available. Doesn't matter which location I tried. I couldn't get one. So I opted for a $23 a month CPX 2020 or 22 with 4 gigabytes of RAM and 80 gigabytes of hard drive space. So that seems good enough. The next thing was make sure you use Ubuntu 24.04 because there are some dependencies that OpenShip installs that weren't working on 26, but they will work on 24. Ask your agent how to create an SSH key if you don't know how locally, and then you add it here and then select it so that you can connect to your remote server. And also ask your agent about adding firewall. You only need 3 rules, firewall rules there, 3 ports available, and then buy your server. And once you have your server, you'll want to go to it and you'll want to get the IP address. Once you've installed OpenShip and you've got it running locally, like I do here, you'll want to add a server. So you go to servers, you go to add a server, put a name in, put an IP address at port 2020, your IP address of your server, root, give it the absolute path of your SSH key. And if you added a passphrase, also add it here. Then click Save Changes, and you should have a server, your server, up and running online that you can connect to and deploy to. So once you've done that, you probably want to buy a domain for your server. I bought mine on Porkbun. Add your A records first and point them to the server's IP address. And then you can get your app ready for deploying. Deploying tends to happen with OpenShip. They like to focus on GitHub repos. I mean, that's the cool thing, right? You have this platform here. You can deploy an app to, or you can push your changes to a GitHub repo and it can auto deploy. That's a great thing. Or you can choose to deploy a new project from a GitHub repo. So that's what I did. But it's easier, obviously, to deploy something that's using like something simple like Astro or a Vite app or a Next.js app. Open SaaS is 3 projects in one. It's a React Vite app client, it's a Node.js Express server, and it's a Postgres database, right? So I actually had to create a Docker Compose file and some Dockerfiles here in the project repo so that when I pushed it, OpenShip would know how to deploy all 3 of those services to my server as one. So the cool thing is I've done the work there. You can go to this repo, which I'll link to in the description, and you can clone that, and it is a copy of the Open SaaS repo with those Docker files and those Docker Compose that you need. So cool. Once you have done that, you can push to the repo, you connect your GitHub to OpenShip, select the repo you want, and you're going to hit some environment variable management. So the thing is that the Docker files already will populate the environment variables that you'll need for you with dummy variables. But then you're going to want to set them up yourself. You're going to have to change some of the dummy variables. So in this case, we want to set a custom domain for our apps, and we need to get that custom domain, right? We said that's why we put those A records in. So you create it here. So you do whatever, like api.yourdomain.com, and then you do the same for your client. And you come here and you put those in. So for the WASP server URL, you put the API URL that you just created, your custom URL here, replace the dummy URL. And for the WASP web client, you use the client URL, custom URL you just created. So api.whatever.com and app.whatever.com, or whatever those custom URLs were. The other thing you need to do is add the API URL, custom one, to your client environment variables and also to the shared environment variables. So you need to add React app API URL and add that here as well so that it can inject it at build time. And then when you click deploy, everything will deploy, but you won't be able to see anything yet because it will only be deployed on HTTP. It won't be on HTTPS. So you won't be able to see anything actually, and you'll see some text records here because yours will be unverified. the status of the URL will be unverified. So you take those text records, you add them to your DNS settings. In my case, it was on pork bun. And then you'll wait a minute and you'll click verify. And then you should get verified URLs with SSL active. And then you'll be able to actually hit your app. So yeah, that's those things took me a long time to kind of figure out, to go through and get working. There were some bugs as well where some things got stuck and I had to kind of clean everything, start from the beginning. Hopefully those bugs are now fixed, so you won't have to deal with those. But there's also some things like the email server. I saw people debating whether you'd actually want to use a VPS as your mail server. That seems to be debatable. But you also have jobs and backups, so you can do nightly backups of your database and things like that. So that seems like a really cool feature of OpenShip, and also the fact that it kind of takes care of all of this, all the domain stuff for you, and the certifications and all that. So yeah, once you've got all that up and running, you'll have your own self-hosted SaaS app if you followed along here. So I think it's really cool. It's still maybe not something that I would use because I don't actually want to have to. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff to think about and manage, and if something goes down, and for that price, for $23 a month, I still think that unless my app is really getting to a point where it's getting tons of traffic, the hosting platforms and providers are probably still good value for the money, especially with how little you actually have to do and think about. So yeah, that's my take on it. I would use this for hobby apps, small things, but I probably wouldn't deploy a really important SaaS or something that has lots of traffic just yet, until I feel more comfortable with OpenShip as a platform and with my own knowledge of self-hosting things. So yeah, that was it. Hope you have fun. Check it out and go crazy.